She's been breaking ground since she first walked into the famed Kronk Gym in Detroit to pursue a boxing career. On to Georgia Tech to get into construction. We're pleased to welcome to the Stories Behind the Door podcast, the Senior Vice President of Tri-Bridge Construction, Robyn Schoch. Excited to be back from my vacation in Italy and even more excited to dive in with today's guest. Before I go there, I'm going to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Kiwi 2 Construction. So excited that they support the podcast. Wayne Woosley and his whole crew, 30 years of providing steel, specifically in the self-storage industry. Cannot thank them enough for supporting the show. Now I get to the Senior Vice President of Tri-Bridge Construction, Robyn Schoch. We had a chance to sit down out at RE a few weeks ago when we were at the 50th anniversary SSA show. I had so much fun just having a conversation with you. We weren't really necessarily talking about business. We were more talking about life. So I'm really excited to get into that. But I also want to talk a little bit of business today. You'd almost think I knew how to talk. Always start the podcast off with the same question. Self-storage is such a niche industry. You know, nobody ever sets out to get into self-storage unless they're born into it that I've ever heard. I've never heard a single person say, I was going to be in self-storage when I grew up. So I want to know how you managed to get into this amazing industry that we're in.
Yeah, great question. I actually stumbled in it, like a lot of people. I had a friend of a friend. That's how I actually met my business partner now, Chad Morrow. We grabbed lunch with a few mutual friends. He was over at Johnson Development Associates looking for a builder that he could trust and count on. I was at Swinnerton at the time, so it felt like a great match. So built my first storage facility in 2015, and the rest is history. I never looked back.
I love it. And tell me a little bit about what about self-storage got you excited to get involved in it?
I mean, I love the product type. I had a background in multifamily. I've built almost every asset class you can think of. Storage gives you everything. I mean, you get to come out of the ground, deal with a difficult site, pour concrete, erect steel. I mean, it's all the things you love and like geek out, about construction without all of the tedious finishes. There are still some finishes and, they need their attention too, but and then also the people in the industry. It's like everybody is down to earth. They're kind of there to help each other. It feels good. So yeah, I love it.
So I'm going to go down a little bit of a road here. Quite frankly, I've been doing this podcast. I just told you before we got on. I'm coming up on 150 guests that have been
That's
in
amazing.
predominantly self-storage. We talk a little bit of small bay flex, which we might get into a little bit as we're talking about the state of construction and self-storage right now. Quite frankly, I'm maybe coming up on a dozen women that I've interviewed in the industry. It's just not a bastion of women in the industry, especially on the GC side of it. So I'm really interested to ask you, right? And first of all, it trips me out. I'm getting prepared for the show, and you're the senior vice president, and I look at you and you're like 20 years old, which I don't mean to be disrespectful at all, but you don't look like you should have a senior title on anything. You've been building self-storage for a decade and have experience in construction before that.
Yep.
What is it about construction that got you hooked, that got you to want to go down that road?
Well, first off, you are too kind, so thank you. But I love building. I love coming out of the ground. I love like the tangible result, right? Of going from nothing to something and having a legacy to share, to show your friends, your family, your children. It feels so good. And then of course, like the people you get to do it with, the camaraderie that is created. It's amazing. I love it.
When did you figure that out? Like at what point in your life did you understand that this was going to be a road that you were excited to go down?
Yeah, so actually coming out of my boxing career, I decided, okay, it's time to get serious. I need to go to college and pick a career. Growing up, I thought I always wanted to be an architect. Of course, a little girl with Legos, blocks and all the things. So my parents always thought I would be an architect, but it wasn't until I was looking at universities and really trying to understand the different majors that I realized architects draw it, contractors build it. Right. And so that's when I pivoted. So I was lucky. I knew before I actually started college, as much as I loved architecture, I really wanted to build it. I wanted to go vertical.
I love that. We're going to talk a little bit about Georgia Tech. I'm old, right? So I'm back from the heyday when Georgia Tech put out some basketball players. So we're going to talk a little bit
Yeah.
about your time at Georgia Tech and what a great school if you're going to get into this field, of course. But you
For
kind of
sure.
slid in there your boxing career, which of course you and I have talked about. Most of the people that watch the podcast know I have a martial arts background, and quite my first fights that I ever did were actually amateur boxing matches. So really excited to go down this road with you. And one of the reasons that I so wanted you to come on the show, you sort of just slid it in after my boxing career, made it an afterthought. Let's go back to the beginning. First of all, how do you get involved in boxing? How did that even come about?
It's a wild story. I mean, I can remember Friday Night Fights, watching Christy Martin. Going back like to the 70s, my mom was actually a professional wrestler. And I knew that growing up, and I thought it was so cool. So I waited until I turned 16, and on my 16th birthday, I asked my parents, could I please, please, please be a boxer? Whatever that meant, right? And so initially they said no. And of course, I pulled out all the pictures of my mom as a professional wrestler and, put my PowerPoint presentation or, you know, my written presentation of why they should let me box together. And they finally gave in. I drove down to the Kronk gym. I was, just a 16-year-old girl living in suburban Detroit. Drove there all by myself, and I convinced them to let me box there. And I convinced one of the coaches to actually coach me.
That is so wild. And, Kronk Gym, world famous for those of us that follow boxing. Emmanuel
Yes.
Stewart, who was a commentator on HBO and trainer of champions. The Sphinx, I think he came up in the gym as well, right? So
Hmm.
just very world famous trainer that you happen to go into his gym. It's not like you walked into nobody's warehouse gym. You walked into one of the best gyms in the world. Tell me a
For
little
sure.
bit about where this took you and how your boxing journey progressed.
Yeah, for sure. I've always been like a go big or go home type of girl. So I guess that's why I drove to the Kronk and convinced them to coach me. I loved it immediately. I loved all the people in there. I loved working hard. I'm someone who always wants to be the best at whatever I'm doing. So it felt, natural. Obviously, I wanted to box for the Kronk gym. I wanted to box for Emmanuel Stewart, and all the people there. So taught me so much. I boxed so this was the 90s, mid 90s when I started. I
I'm
know.
blown away that you were born in the early '80s. Like you just, I wish I carried my age the way you do. Anyway, keep
You're
going.
so kind. You're so kind. Um, but yeah, so I spent, about 5 years boxing, mostly in Detroit. I eventually relocated to Atlanta. I knew I wanted to go to Georgia Tech, so I had to move here ahead of time and establish residency because I couldn't afford to be out of state. I was paying for myself. But yeah, so great years boxing at the Kronk Gym. A lot of great memories.
You have a massive amateur record, right? I had three amateur fights. I won two of them, and then I was dumb and I signed up for a tournament in a weight division that was 205 and under, and I weighed 184 pounds. Didn't go so well when I met the guy at the top of the division. Your amateur record was long and storied. Tell me a little bit about the number of fights you had and how you eventually, reached the end of that career.
Yeah, for sure. 59 and 7. So I boxed my tail off. I mean, it wild. As a junior and senior in high school, I still did my fair share of partying and doing all the things. But on Friday nights, I mean, you would probably catch me in a boxing match. So, and Saturdays I was in the gym. I don't know how I did it. Had fun and also was a decorated boxer. But yeah, so a lot of times I would fight, at Emmanuel had a restaurant on the river. So a lot of boxing matches in Detroit. I got to practice against a ton of decorated, professional boxers. So it was such a great experience. But I'll tell you what, and I think we touched on this in Vegas. My 7 losses, I mean, that's where the most growth happened, of course. So I'll never forget any of them. Tough
I
losses, but I mean, it's what makes you grow, for sure.
I can definitely. I had 8 losses in my fighting career out of 13 fights, and certainly wouldn't change anything for it. And you're right; it's the losses that really kind of help you grow more than the wins. I
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about this, boxing is not something that normal people get attracted to. And I say that
Right.
in the corner with you, right? Because I was the same mentality that you are. I want to dive into the mentality of this. What was it about boxing that, like, specifically really got you excited to go do it?
So for me, it was like a game of chess. People will refer to me as a fighter, and even though I mean, I could brawl with the best of them. I didn't really think of it as fighting. I was trying to outsmart my opponent, right? I was trying to hit them as much as possible without getting hit. So defense, was always a big thing. I got to a point where I was crafty enough to go from a traditional stance to a southpaw, and I could jump back and forth to really throw my opponents kind of off their game. So a game of chess, really. That's what I loved about it.
The tactics of it.
Yes. Yep.
That's awesome. And tell me, I mean, listen, 59-7, especially for a woman in the 90s, not to it was 25, 30 years ago, women in boxing was not as common as it is today. That's a lot
Right.
of fights to get. Tell me what the goal was. Where were you headed? What were you looking to do with the boxing side of it?
So I wanted to be the best amateur ultimately. I didn't stick in the game long enough, to get to go to the Olympics. But that was fine. I mean, I really did. I was part of a lot of the groundwork to get us to the Olympics. So that is, very near and dear to my heart. Yeah, absolutely loved it. I'm a huge proponent for, women doing non-ordinary things like boxing or going into construction. I think that there's a complementary side to us. And it works well in construction or, even in boxing. I got along with my coaches so well. And I was able to really listen and learn so much from them. So it was absolutely amazing journey.
I love that. And so you transition out of this amateur boxing career, you decide you're not going to go pro in that and
Yeah.
don't want to pursue that. Instead, Georgia Tech. How did that boxing path prepare you to go to college and get into the construction business?
The grit that it took, to box and do that for so long, prepared me so well, to go to Tech. And there were still nights at Georgia Tech that I cried myself to sleep. I'm definitely not someone who's super smart naturally. I have to work really hard. So, worked my butt off, graduated with high honors, loved every single minute of it. But like I said, I'm a go big or go home kind of person. And I do like to be the best. That also carried forward in construction. So I always want to be the best, and that's defined differently by everybody. And that journey has changed for me what the best looks like. But yeah, boxing is the foundation of all of that for me, for sure.
What are the similarities you find between what you were doing in boxing and now as, operating a construction company?
Well, so I always tell, like, especially young people, like I said, I'm very passionate about encouraging women to go into construction or just, working with young people, period. I mentor a lot. And I always tell people, my older sister, who's my mentor, always told me growth happens outside of your comfort zone, right? So push yourself. Do the things, you want to get nervous. That means you're growing. So, keep pushing, keep pushing. And then just always be the best person you can be. I mean, those two things will take you so far, in whatever you do.
I love that. So you mentioned it in your previous answer how you're kind of figuring out what the goal was has changed a little bit.
Yeah.
What is it that Robin Schoch and Tribridge Construction, what do you define as looking like the best?
So for us, I mean, repeat customers. We want our trade partners, our subcontractors. We couldn't do anything we do without them. We want them to be successful, and of course for us to be successful too, and our clients as well. We like to be, as transparent as we'll dig through the drawings on the front end, of a project. We'll let clients know every single thing we see, whether we end up being the partner or not. We want them to be successful. We want them to continue doing deals. There's enough deals out there for everybody. So, we're not sore losers. When people come back to us for repeat business, that's the best compliment we get. There's no better feeling, right? And all of our customers right now are repeat customers, which just feels so good to me.
I love that. I'm going to ask an interesting question, because it's an observation I made. Obviously, I came out of the martial arts world, right, and not so much boxing. I did 3 amateur boxing matches, but got into kickboxing and
Mm.
had an MMA fight at one point. And one of the things I loved about it was that it's you, right? Like it's you versus somebody else, but it's really not just you, right? It's you and a whole bunch of people that help prepare you, kind of similar to what's going on in the construction world, right? Because ultimately, Tri-Bridge Construction is the company, but you can't operate in a vacuum.
Right. No, absolutely not. I mean, I already gave a shout out to all of our trade partners, but our team members are unbelievable. They're the best at what they do when it comes to executing, which allows me to stay on the front end, putting deals together, making sure we're set up for success, us and the clients and the subcontractors. So you're absolutely right. I couldn't do that without everybody else pulling in the same direction.
I'm going to transition a little bit now and kind of bring this more of a business conversation. It's not really a secret, I think, in 2025 going into 2026, the storage development side of things has slowed down a little bit, right?
Right.
Depending on what numbers you believe, I always use Radius Plus. They're really good at tracking new developments. I
Right.
think like an average of about 1,300 deliveries each of the previous 2 years, and we're looking at somewhere less than 600 this year, right? So,
Right.
less than half the project's actually coming out of the ground right now. How
Right.
challenging has that been for you guys as GCs?
It's definitely been challenging. I mean, I get asked this question a lot, like, what does this year look like for you? Looks a lot different than last year, but not necessarily bad. So we've had last year we were flooded with RFPs and just trying to navigate. We're a smaller group, navigate what that looked like and prioritizing. This year, there's been a lot of old deals coming back online that can be redesigned. We can squeeze costs out, so really kind of partnering early this year, that's kind of just been the theme, I'll say, of 2025. So, we've got a couple four stories that, we can now take, 2021 IBC, we can now take to light gauge.
Love it.
So a lot of that going on, just really trying to optimize the site. And, there's only so many levers you can pull in storage, but really knowing those levers and pulling them all to get it as cost effective as possible without compromising the asset, of course. So that's something I think that's helped us tremendously. And I know, my partner was on the development side for a lot of years. So just our ability to, optimize the site, we can take things through entitlement, expedite the permit. We love to do that, actually. I think incentives are aligned. So to just, be able to do that all the way through design management, permitting, and then actually build it, so we offer a lot of services to our partners.
I'm going to dive into this because not everybody that watches the podcast is as familiar with the development side as you and I are. The
Mhm.
2021 IBC was a pretty big change. And a
Yes.
lot of the things that were underwritten in 2021, 2022, developers still weren't really aware necessarily that that change had happened. Talk me through exactly what happened and why this idea of 3 stories to 4 stories is making a big difference, right? You're able to add another story and get that extra square footage without
Yeah.
driving your build cost crazy. Talk to me a little bit of exactly what happened and how it's helping people maybe start getting stuff out of the ground that's been a challenge to pencil the last couple of years.
For sure. So traditionally before 2021 IBC, we would have to be, column and beam, or we could do a first floor podium with light gauge or cold form steel above. So now we're able to do that with 4 stories. So you eliminate your podium, you eliminate the fire spray. I mean, that's $300,000 that you're saving. $3 a foot if it's a prototypical 100,000 square foot facility. That's a really big deal. So it goes faster. You don't have to worry about the fire spray, and then traditional column and beam, fire spray all 4 or however many stories. So that's really been a game changer for sure. And a lot of jurisdictions, some haven't even adopted it yet. So we have had to, push really hard and advocate for it. And a lot of times it's just making sure, just the education piece, right, with the jurisdiction, making sure they understand it and pushing for that. And a lot of times they will be flexible. So it's been amazing.
I love that. I'm looking at a project right now where it's a 3-story design, but the 4th story might make all the difference in terms of being able to make it pencil. And of
Right.
course, 2, 3 years ago, couldn't even have thought about doing that. In 2022, the IBC still hadn't been adopted hardly anywhere.
Right.
But to your point about understanding that, and I love you're actually the first person I've had bring this up when I asked this question. You are not the first GC I've talked to. I'll be quite honest. I talked to a bunch of GCs on the podcast. You
Yeah.
guys are incredible, but there are a few of you out there. You're the
Yep.
first one that brought up this idea of in 2025. One of the things that's happening is some of these projects that maybe were underwritten in 21, 22, even into the beginning of 23, when the landscape of rates was very different,
Yep.
people were underwriting to different interest rates. Now we're
Right.
able to come back. You talk to me a little bit about that shift, and are we starting to see maybe coming back to some velocity in the development market?
Hope so. I'm definitely hopeful. I think with 2021 IBC, having a partner that can really help optimize or cut costs out, that will help tremendously. I'm hoping that that's a big game changer.
I love that. And so one thing I wanted to bring up with you, we talked about this a little bit. We're starting to see more people talk, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I talk about small bay industrial flex all the time.
Mhm.
Are you starting to see people come to you with that product type more often?
We are. And I'm so excited. I mean, I've reached out to you a couple times.
Yep, for
So,
sure.
I mean, I love the idea of that. I think it makes all the sense, and I think we're going to see a lot of it in the next couple of years for sure.
What do you think is driving that interest?
So, I think, post COVID, there was so much big industrial built. I think that it's going to take us a while to grow into all of that. So I just don't think there's really a need. And I think, outside of storage, there's other uses for like storage that doesn't fit into a typical storage facility. So you need a little bit more space. I think businesses can set up. I mean, I've had a client come to me, in Metro Nashville thinking about, people with car collections, or, nice vehicle, like, just all of the above. And I think that it makes a lot of sense. There's just not really a product type out there that's offered that would fit that need. So I'm super excited, hoping you'll hear more from me about it.
I love it. That's actually how we first connected. You reached out to me on LinkedIn and asked a question and was happy to share what little knowledge I have to help out.
Yep.
I'm intrigued now. You mentioned getting into storage in 2015. You've obviously been in construction for a long time.
Mhm.
I always kind of relate where we're going through right now back to 2008 and the GFC. I'm
Right.
interested from your perspective in construction, kind of having been in this industry now for a while, even though it may not seem like it based on looking at you, your experience level goes through a couple cycles now.
Yep.
Are you seeing any similarities now to maybe when you were early on in the business?
Some, I mean, I don't think it's as extreme. Thankfully, that was definitely a scary time. I think one thing, for sure coming from SSA a couple weeks ago, there's definitely a lot of capital out there. People have money to spend. There's just a shortage of sites,
Yeah.
and just finding those ideal sites, and then making sure that area is not oversaturated because there are a lot of areas that are oversaturated. So those higher barrier of entry markets, but that does take a lot of money on the front end, right? A lot of sunk costs, if that doesn't work out. But that was the theme. I came back from Vegas and pretty much every client I spoke to said, if you have any sites, please send them to me. And, ironically enough, we actually do see a lot of sites. We do have relationships with brokers, and then just the one-offs. We have a lot of site work contractors, which this is kind of a new thing that I'm seeing a lot of. They will find sites, they will entitle them and then try to sell them, and they're kind of off market. So we've had luck with that. We've got a couple of deals that look like that we'll flip to our clients. And the one thing we ask is, hey, please work with us if we bring that site to you. We'll be transparent, of course, but please use us. So it's literally creating your own pipeline to an extent. And the clients are super
I
thankful.
I love that, and you and I are gonna have a further conversation, not on the podcast about that, but what I'd like to ask a little bit is, are we seeing some of these types of things happen because of the necessity of the market. As the market tends to get tighter, people are coming up with really good ways to make business happen.
Right, for sure. I mean, you have to be creative, especially in times like this. I mean, you talked about the drop in deals, over the last 12 months. It's significant. So luckily for us, we are a smaller company. So, we don't have a huge mouth to feed. We have very, very little overhead. So we're still able to be very competitive. But creativity is a must for sure over these next at least 12 months.
Let's talk a little bit about Tribridge Construction. You and Chad Morrow, you have this company. What's your bread and butter? Where do you want to be working? What's your ideal client? Who would you want to be working with? What do you want to be building?
So, storage, of course, is at the heart of what we do. Tribridge is a real estate company, mostly in multifamily, or that's where they started 60 years ago as the original Julian LaCroix. We develop multifamily and build multifamily. And then Chad and I focus on third party general contracting, for storage or small bay flex, for sure. But so yeah, it's a great company. There is about 30 of us total in the construction group. It's split about half and half work on multifamily, half work on storage. They can kind of go, back and forth if they wish. But team's been with me for several years. I think, my shortest employee is three or 4 years. So really proud of the team.
I love that. So, geographically, is there places you guys would rather be? Are there places you feel like your expertise is really strong?
Yeah, so high barrier to entry markets. I mean, I think that is somewhere where we really focus. With Chad, his ability on the front end and us, our ability to navigate the jurisdiction. I think it makes a lot of sense to partner with someone like us. I would say anywhere up and down the East Coast, really anywhere in the country we'll build. So we have projects in Texas, up in the Midwest. We have several in the Northeast. We have one in Atlanta, one in South Carolina. We've got a couple in South Florida. So we love to build in Miami-Dade, Broward. Those are higher barrier to entry markets. So it makes a lot of sense. We'll do all the permitting. That's just a service that we include. And again, like I said, our incentives are aligned. We want to get started. We want to keep the project moving. We want our client to be happy. We want them to use us again. So we love to be able to offer that service. But really, anywhere, we're repeat clients, like I said, are so important to us. So, wherever they need us, we want to be able to be there for them.
As somebody who just went through a small bay project that got denied on a by right use by a planning board, I can tell you the value of somebody willing to go through the permitting process for you that's really good at it.
For
I
sure.
became the first for a whole lot of people, a civil engineer, a developer, there were a whole lot of people that were like, we've never seen this before. That didn't
Right.
make me feel any better, but I can vouch for how important it is to have good people taking care of that piece of the project. Robyn,
For sure.
it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you even more deeply than we got a chance to do out in Vegas. Really, really fun to dive into your story and quite frankly, impressed to beyond words by your story. It's really, really cool to see somebody who's just gone out and kind of paved a path that is quite frankly not the normal path. So really, really fun to have you on and thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you do to bring great people together. I really appreciate
Uh,
it.
really appreciate the kind words. I am going to check off by saying again, such a thank you to this is Wayne Woosley, who many of you in the self storage industry know. He's been providing steel for 30 plus years to this industry, literally thousands of self storage facilities that have Kiwi steel in it. Really appreciate them for sponsoring the podcast. For any of you guys out there who need steel, please reach out to them and tell them Thaddeus Campbell sent you. Of course, everyone knows Wayne already, so it may not carry much weight that you tell them that I told you to go. We are going to sign off. The senior vice president of construction at Tribridge Construction. I keep emphasizing that senior because to me, you look like you're 25 years old, which I think is a really good thing. She's Robyn Schoch. I'm Thaddeus Campbell. That's it for this week's episode of the Stories Behind the Door podcast.
Thank you.